President Biden promised to be America's uniter-in-chief. We heard him repeat it time and time again during his 2020 campaign and when he first took office. But now the president is once again facing fierce backlash for making divisive comments, sending this message in his commencement address to the graduating class at a historically black school, Howard University, over the weekend.
Stand up against the poison of white supremacy, as I did my inaugural address, to single out as the most dangerous terrorist threat to our homeland is white supremacy.
President Joe Biden earning a lecture from Fox News ghoul Kayleigh McEnany for daring to mention white supremacy in a college commencement speech. And Biden's words must have struck a nerve over at Fox, because they were furious.
But right now, our sovereignty is at stake. Right now, people are still fighting high prices of things. Like we're in the midst of history making for all the wrong reasons. The blacks in that audience care about that. You don't think that we care about the 100%. Economy?
Of course.
I mean, come on, you don't have to victimize us to reach us, but that's what he does. No one's putting us in chains.
That's a great point.
Is it though? Is it really a great point, Kayleigh? That was Fox's Harris Faulkner. But here's the interesting thing. Faulkner knows that if you look up the numbers, white supremacist violence is the leading driver of terrorism in the United States. But she can't say that. So watch Faulkner try to tiptoe around it.
But this is really important because there is domestic terrorism in our country. And you can look at the facts and see where that's coming from. You can also say that two things are true. Things can be a problem without being the number one or the only problem.
Yeah, that's right. If you do something dumb like looking at the data, you might find that white supremacist terrorism is the country's top threat. But who wants to label these things? Certainly not Harris Faulkner. Though credit to her for pioneering the bold new "what about all the other terrorism" line of defense. But while the Fox Newsers are busy clutching their pearls, some Republicans are actually standing up and demanding that Joe Biden do something about white supremacy. Specifically, they'd like a lot more of it, please. Here's Wisconsin Congressman Glenn Grothman.
A study was done a little while ago on the federal judiciary. I wish we had these studies for all other appointments by the Biden administration. And apparently his first 2 years, President Biden had appointed 97 federal judges. Of the 97 federal judges, I was expecting maybe 25 or 30 were white guys, because I know President Biden wasn't heavy on appointing more white guys. 5 of the 97 judges were white guys. Of those, 2 were gay. So almost impossible for a white guy who's not gay, apparently, to get appointed here.
So just so everyone is clear, this is how Glenn Grothman has been spending his time in Washington. It sure is easy when you aren't burdened by the hard work of actually having to govern. Grothman complains about BLM activists making everything about race, while being pretty focused on race himself. But listen, I put that idiot on the screen, so by my own rules, let's dig into those numbers a little bit. Join me, won't you? First off, it's absolutely true that Joe Biden has nominated fewer white men than his predecessors. Nearly 85% of Donald Trump's judicial nominations were white men. So were 65% of Barack Obama's judges. But even with Biden's more progressive approach, there's still a lot more room to make up. Black judges make up 12% of the federal courts, while whites make up almost 2/3, despite whites being just over half the nation. The strong preference for white judges survives even in Democratic administrations. When people talk about institutionalizing white supremacy, this is exactly what they mean. But let's go back to Fox News, where one anchor made clear that protecting the image of national unity is way more important than tackling the very real threat of white supremacist violence. Watch this.
Yeah, I think his commitment to unity lasted the end of that sentence, because we've seen nothing but divisiveness and exactly the kind of stoking and incendiary rhetoric coming from him this entire time. I thought that speech was fantastically degrading. It is so degrading to paint a portrait based on an assumption of the box checked by everyone sitting there and their families, and essentially that there is apparently zero drop of anything else impacting those families, that the most important thing facing them is this enemy.
Gibberish. Just total gibberish. What can you even... How do I respond to that? I mean, if you think the families attending a graduation at a historically black college don't know about white supremacy, well, Bless your heart. And these were the people who used to shout that facts don't care about your feelings. Joe Biden is doing the long overdue work of warning Americans about the rising tide of white supremacy. But we should also pay attention to who is threatened by that message, and consider asking why they're so defensive about holding white supremacist extremists accountable. Republicans expected Biden to avoid thorny social issues like white supremacy in his 2024 campaign. Instead, Biden is leaning in on one of the Democratic Party's core organizing values. Keep an eye on where all the rats start to scatter for safety. With that said, it's not all bad. Check out this video of Dr. Janine Downey absolutely pummeling Fox News lad Pete Hegseth over Republican book bans. And as always, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below so you can let me know what I should cover next.